Okay, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us for this FishBowl experience. And during this time, we want to really address collect some community feedback on virtualization of ICSE and think a little bit about what software engineering conferences might look like as we move forward. So, first of all, I just want to kind of set the stage for the kind of things that we want to talk about. I know over the last few days and weeks, in fact, there's been a lot of discussion about virtualizing ICSE. Basically, the ICSE response team has been meeting over the last couple of months every week and spending a lot of time through this week's planning and coming up with what we hoped and I think has proven to be a really great virtual conference. However, we realized a few days ago that we had a really good opportunity to have a community discussion about this because everybody here at ICSE has basically lived and breathed the experience of virtual ICSE. So first of all, I want to give a huge call out to Krista and her team, Jonathan Bell and others. You know, when we were not sure what to do at the beginning, we approached Krista and she was, as you know, Gregg's already mentioned this, super enthusiastic and had all these ideas and plans. It was a little scary at times, but I think the point I want to make right now is that Krista and her team have shown us what's possible. So we're not going to be imagining this, kind of thinking about, can we do it? Is it possible? It is possible. We've done it. It's worked. And, you know, huge thank you to Krista, Jonathan, and all the others, the student volunteers, everybody that's made this possible. So clap, clap, clap. Okay. But we want to go beyond that today. So we want to talk more. We want to talk about more than just the technology. We want to talk about shaping and envisioning kind of the future of what software engineering conferences can, should, could be as we move forward. And I know one of the kind of recurring themes that I've heard a lot of people saying is that, you know, ICSE will never be the same again. And in fact, virtualization in some shape or form is basically here to stay. But what we want to do today is to, you know, it's really like a kind of a massive or a large crowdsourcing requirements engineering exercise, which me as a requirements engineer, I'm kind of happy to have the opportunity to do this at ICSE. But I think it's really important for us as a community to think about where we want to go. Let's just assume at this point that the technology is going to support us, but what do we want the future of ICSE and the future of software engineering conferences to be? So this is our opportunity to talk about it. And you can see that we, as I said, we're going to use a FishBowl style discussion forum here. And I'm going to explain what that is in a minute. But so you can see we have several starting panelists here. And with a FishBowl, some of you, or hopefully many of you, have had experience in a FishBowl before. But basically, it means that our panelists are here, but they're not here to stay. You can replace them. So right before you came, we had a kind of drawing lots, and we've kind of established an order. And so we know the order in which our fish are in the FishBowl are going to be move out and move into the audience. And we want to encourage you to be highly interactive, share your thoughts, share your questions. This is a webinar. So that means that you can ask questions. There's a Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. You can ask questions without being afraid that you're going to get pulled onto the panel. You can just put chat, type things into the chat window. And if you've typed stuff in, if you've shared ideas, and if you have things you want to share with us, you can raise your little digital hand. And Darko is going to be kind of keeping an eye out for that, and we're all going to be looking for that. And we want you to rotate in. We want this to be a discussion of more than just us. Okay, without any further ado, and if nobody puts their hand up, you know, we're going to be kind of pulling extra people in because we really want to hear ideas from lots of different people. So without any further ado, let me introduce the initial fish. And I don't want to call them panelists. In fact, I used to go to a boarding school and we are now known as old fish. So it feels like a kind of natural kind of thing to say this. So our initial fish today are Gregg Rothermel. As you know, he's the general chair of ICSE 2020. His co-chair was not able to come because it is very much the middle of the night in Korea. Our next panelist is Pooyan Jamshidi from the University of South Carolina. The next panelist is, trying to do this in order, Jon Whittle from Monash University in Australia. Thank you for staying up very late to join us today, John. Dongmei Zhang, also staying up late from Microsoft Research in China. Bashar Nuseibeh from Lero in Ireland. And finally, last but not least, Brittany Johnson, who tells me she has a new job starting at George Mason this summer. So without any further ado, each of our panelists or our fish are going to start by giving a very short kind of thought about how they imagine or reimagine software engineering conferences in the future with respect to virtualization and some of the issues that we've been grappling with this week. So I'm going to hand over to Gregg to start with.
Thanks, Jane. Am I unmuted? Yep. Thanks for organizing this. This was Jane's idea about 2 days ago, and a pretty fun one at that. Thanks everyone for coming to this. You know, I'm actually going to steal a minute to thank everyone once again for coming to ICSE and thank all the organization committee for everything they've done. I was looking back at my notes, and we proposed this conference in May of 2016, so 4 years ago. But actually, we started lobbying for it in about 2012. So it's been a long road, and and then a lot of work happened, and then you know, all hell broke loose. And then April 20th was our first meeting with Krista, and so that's 2 months that they had to pull this together. We had, but they had. And imagine 2 months, all this could happen. What can you do when you're actually planning this from the start? I think that's one of the things that we want to get at today. So that's all I'll have to say, and I'll pass the baton to whoever's next.
So it's Pooyan. And I should say, I did not introduce Krista because she's not going to be part of the panel that rotates in and out. She can answer questions throughout, and we'll give her a chance to share her thoughts at the end. Okay, Pooyan.
Hi, everybody. Jane, thanks for organizing this. I presume you need me to describe basically my vision, right? At the moment, or just introduce myself?
Oh, this is your 3 minutes. Tell us what you think.
Okay,
you know,
sure.
where are we going? Where do you want us to go?
Absolutely. Thanks. We all, for several years, practiced the physical meeting. It worked very well. We are familiar with that. This year at ICSE, we also practiced this virtual meeting. As far as I can say, it worked very well. It was smooth, and I loved it. Everyone was first-hand citizens, so there were lots of interactions, even more interactions than physical, at least for those of us. At least for me, I could interact more, and it was more smooth for me rather than physical. So moving forward, I would imagine a hybrid model that I would prefer, that we have physical meetings, we have physical conference, but also at the same time we have virtual attendees. Ideally, in an ideal world, I would imagine that all, including physical attendees, those who present, and also virtual attendees, all of us should be first-hand citizens, not only the physical attendees. virtual attendees should be first-hand citizen. Let me explain what I mean. So basically, physical attendees can talk with each other, they can talk with the presenters, they're first-hand citizens by default. But virtual attendees in this hybrid model, we don't have current technology, at least I could not see that we could basically make them first-hand citizen in this model in a way that they could interact smoothly with those who are has physical presence, those who present, they could engage well, they can get the same opportunities as those who are physical present at the moment. So basically, what I'm saying is that we should find a way, we should develop the technologies and everything to make virtual attendees also first-hand and not second-hand citizen. They could interact and engage with the community in the same way, and they could get the same opportunities. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pouyan. Okay, we'll move on to Jon.
Great, thanks, Jane. So, sorry, I'm losing my voice. I guess I want to start by just saying an absolute congratulations to all the organizers of this thing. I mean, this is absolutely a phenomenal achievement, what you guys have achieved. I can remember being at an IFIP working group meeting back in February in Panama with Jane when COVID-19 first was starting up, and I remember we had a conversation, Jane, about whether ICSE would go ahead or not, and we briefly thought about it being virtual, and I think both of us just looked at each other in horror as though how could that even happen? And so the fact that it's happened, and it's happened in such an amazing way, because it wasn't what a lot of conferences have done, which is to just do it in one time zone and put everything online. It's had all this amazing stuff. So massive congratulations in such a short period of time. Looking to the future, I think what I've noticed from kind of participating in the conference, I've come to the conclusion that when you're doing a virtual or a hybrid conference, you have to design the conference in a different way. And let me just give you an idea of what I mean by that. So, we're used to conferences that are just a kind of long list of talks. And that's more or less what we had for the most part this year. And that's not meant as a criticism, it's because it was done in a very short period of time. But you could do that differently. I mean, all these talks have been on YouTube anyway, so you could really turn that on its head, and you could, have people kind of view the talks ahead of time and then focus the actual sessions more on discussion. And related to that, I mean, the parts of the ICSE program this year that I found that by far the best were those interactive discussions. So the Ask Me Anything sessions, let's please keep the Ask Me Anything sessions for the future. They were amazing. And really because we got a chance to hear, in many cases from the presenters, very personal stories about, what they'd done and things that they hadn't achieved. And I think it's a great mentoring thing apart from anything else. But even on the talks, I would say that because it's online, the way that people present talks should change. So just to give you an example of that, I watched one session from my car outside the supermarket just because of the timing of things. So I was watching it on my mobile phone. But of course, we had many presenters that were presenting as though they were in a conference room with, lots of text on the slides, and it's impossible to read on your mobile phone. So I think we have to rethink actually about how we even put our slides together, given that it's going to be an online talk. So those are just a couple of examples. But so I guess to finish, my main point is that there were clearly some design principles behind the virtualization this year, the 3 time bands, which I thought was a stroke of genius. And I think we will be hybrid next year. I think we have to be hybrid next year. But what I think we need principles or values behind, what that hybridization looks like, and then we need to design for hybridization. And I suggest that we actually write those principles down and we communicate them and live by them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jon. Okay, it's Dong Mei next, please.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Thanks for organizing this FishBowl and also inviting me. Same as John, I just want to say, like, the OC absolutely did a phenomenal job organizing the first ever virtual ICSE, and you guys really set the history. So congratulations. So regarding my own experiences attending the conference so far, I think there are a couple of things I really like the virtual part. Like, first of all, I think this is the first time for me to really be able to overlap attending the conference with my daily work. Like in the past, when I would travel to the conferences, so I would feel a little bit guilty, doing my own work, right? Like for my regular work, I would think, hey, I'm already here. Why don't I just concentrate on attending the conference? But now with the sessions scheduled, right? So I can really do some of my regular work. I think that's one. And the other part is for the sessions I do not get to attend, I can view the video later on. I think that part is also working. So in moving forward, there are a couple of the virtual aspects I would like to have in the future, even if we have the physical conference. So the first one is that I would like to have the discussion channel associated with the video of each talk. So that way, after the session ends, the presenters can still answer questions from the audience. We can just keep the discussion open and going. And also for the people who do not get to attend the sessions, they can still view the video, browse the discussion history, and also they can participate asynchronously. They can just tag people, tag the presenters, and then they can just ask questions. So at least I think if we can get this going within the during the conference, or maybe even better, sometime for some time even after the conference, I think that would be great. So that is something I would love to have in the future. And then for the physical conference, I think I would miss a couple things. So one is the in-person interaction. I think meeting people, I think that's a great aspect about going to conferences. Also, there's this cultural aspect. When we go to conferences, we get to opportunities to go to different cities, different countries. That's the learning part, the fun part. So, but right now, I don't think I have a very good ideas about how to do a great hybrid conference. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Bashar.
Sorry, I was muted there. So I suppose I should start as well by echoing what everyone said, which is this has been an amazing conference, and the thing that really has made it like this is it took me by surprise. To be honest, I wasn't expecting to have an ICSE in July. I'd seen all the calls coming in and register now, and I was tempted almost not to attend because I thought this is just going to be a series of seminars on the web. And I'm really glad I didn't. And to some extent, the entry threshold for coming into this was quite low. It was relatively inexpensive. It looked like it was fairly easy. All the publicity said this is an easy entry point. And so I decided to come, and it's been really an amazing experience. And I've been so impressed by the infrastructure. And I've tried to immerse myself despite being a beginner in most of the technologies that are being used. I found it, I struggled, but I tried to engage and I hope sort of people noticed it, and that I tried to talk to people that I didn't speak to before. But I think going forward from this one-off experience, which is a reaction to an emergency, I think the one thing that I think we need to think about is what are we organizing these conferences for? And I think, Jane, you started at the beginning by mentioning the word community, and then Puyan mentioned the word citizenship, and then John mentioned the notions of values. And I think these are the kinds of the three, if we're looking for principles and trying to elaborate, then notions of belonging to a community that shares some values is probably a good starting point. And that if we can try to unpack those a little bit, we can make progress. The notion of communities is quite important. I mean, whether it's physical or digital will depend a lot on circumstances, and we have to adapt around those. It would be really sad if we didn't have a physical presence, And so I hope we do have some kind of hybrid, but the hybrid doesn't have to be, as we've seen, always in May. It doesn't have to be over 3 days only. It could be across time. So long as we're getting the things that we want out of that community, which is engagement, interaction, collaboration, and some sort of some amplification of the values that we care about. So I think we need to be a little bit careful about just thinking about the technology that supports the traditional values that we had in a physical conference and then supplement them with the convenience of virtualization. I think it's a little bit more than just convenience and the physical input. I think we need to try and see how we can get the connectivity that actually for our benefit. I think there are some things that have happened that have that we need to think about, and it's the psychology, the social psychology of it all. I normally get on a plane, travel, go into a conference, check in. For about 12 to 24 hours, I'm mentally preparing myself for the conference, whereas at the beginning of the week, I just clicked and I was suddenly in the conference, and it was a bit overwhelming. And it took me a whole day to realize I was in the conference and to attend sessions. And I think we need to think about how people engage with an environment like this and how they feel that they've joined, and how sessions end and how they begin and so on. So there's a whole range of really interesting issues that I think we need to think about to sort of to meet our community and citizenship goals. One last comment. I loved Puyan's notion of a first-time citizen, because we're all first-time citizens in this, but we also have to try and maintain first-class citizenship so that over time, people, whether they're physical or digital, they're still experiencing it in an equal and sort of diversified way, and don't lose out.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bashar. Great points. And Brittany.
Awesome. So I want to start just like everyone else and say how I think this has been quite amazing. Again, I didn't know you guys really literally had just started thinking 2 months ago about how this would work virtually. And I wouldn't have guessed it as an attendee either way. So I think it was fantastic. I think everyone else in the FishBowl has made fantastic points. And I want to kind of +1 the idea of this hybrid notion. I think that one thing that I thought worked really well, I don't think anyone mentioned specifically the social aspect of the conference. You heard the networking and the interactions and things. But another reason that people come to conferences is to see people that they haven't seen in a while, to catch up over coffee or tea or things like that. And I think that was one of the things I felt was kind of missing more so in the scheduling, or that didn't happen as often. We have the hallways and things like that, but you kind of have to have somewhat of an initiative to say, if this hallway is empty or there's no one here I want to talk to, let me start a hallway and sit here and hope that someone's going to come and join me. And I think one nice thing about the physical conferences is we have these coffee breaks where we run into each other, and we, even if we don't have that kind of outgoing nature to start our own room, we don't have to. There's a room full of people around us already. And one thing I really liked about the way it was organized this time was the social event. The social event had these rooms where you make your avatar, and the avatar talks, and the closer you get to the other avatars, the more you hear them. They're almost mimicking that actual being there and actually talking to people at the social event. I thought that was brilliant. We learned very late in that you can actually also have your video up. So you have your avatar, and you can also have your video to make it more personal if that's what you'd like. So I think finding, again, this nice mix between the advantages of doing virtual, which are these recording talks, as Dong May mentioned. I thought that was fantastic as well. I always wish that ICSE would record the talks. I always miss talks that I really want to see. And with the time bands, which was brilliant, unfortunately for me or people that have certain interests, some of the talks would fall under a time band where you can't, see it. So I think the recordings was fantastic, but I think finding that balance between having that sort of access, but then also still having these semi-natural bumping into interactions, especially I think for me, I was bummed with my presentation, and I was hoping to get some good questions and some good conversations on the presentation, but if no one shows up in your hallway, or if you don't get that as often. So I think having some way, and I think Bashar mentioned this as well, having some way of finding a really good balance. What that is, I'm not 100% sure. The virtual thing was so cool. I just wanted to be walking through halls and into presentations that way as well for some reason. And I know that's probably a huge technical burden, but just, synergizing and brainstorming, I think that was successful. And I think that if we can find a balance between that type of environment and the physical, if that need be, then I think that would be ideal.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brittany. And Krista, I hope you took note of that we expect avatars to go everywhere next time around.
It was so awesome. It was so cool. We had so much fun in our room.
Okay, so I think that's you know, some different perspectives, but kind of a really kind of coherent message here about how important it is for meetings and for kind of those interpersonal kind of connection times, maybe more importantly than just sitting and listening to talks and things like that. Great ideas. So now we're going to start kind of taking some of the comments from the attendees and actually possibly kind of bringing people in
Jane,
and out.
There is a question from Andreas that I would like to try to tackle. Is that okay?
Okay, I was going to do one other one first, but yeah, we can do that.
You're the boss.
Okay, so okay, but let's do that. Let's do that one first anyway. So Andreas, I'm going to can you tell us, you have your, you can unmute and you can talk now, Andreas. Can you tell us your question?
Hello, this is Andreas Zeller. So I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. What you cannot see is my thumbs up, down, which I'm doing here in front of the camera because that's what I want to express. This has been an amazing event so far. And please, and I have been extremely excited about all the great work that you put together. This was just wonderful. One thing I have been missing in contrast to a physical meeting is, well, essentially hallway meetings. That is bumping into people who are also in the hallway right now and who have time for a quick chat. But and a quick chat, say 2 or 3 minutes is all I need. Just get me what's going on in your place at Microsoft. So what is your next career move? Whatsoever, these simple exchanges that certainly do not warrant scheduling a Zoom meeting or even pinging someone on Slack or whatsoever. But that's something, just walking around and figuring out, hi, what are you doing? What are you doing? We tried that with the Mozilla hubs, but in the end, I ended up in a room with 3 other Germans whom I already knew, and it was difficult to find out what we're doing. I have no good idea on how to do this better, but this could be an area where we can still, also with our technological power, where we can still improve in the future.
And I think that's kind of built on what Brittany was saying. So Krista, you want to address that?
Yes. So, I mean, the lobby track is one of the blank slates here of especially the platform that Jonathan and Benjamin and I, you know, the Clouder platform, we have this lobby, and we don't really have any very predefined ideas about what that should be. This is a permanent work in progress until we're trying out. Actually, you probably noticed that we were changing the code as the conference was moving along, because we don't know what works. I think we have a platform for experimenting, and that's I think what's interesting and cool about this, because we can experiment, we can try different things. With respect to you know, the 3D virtual is, you know, having the idea of a simulated space and stuff like that. Maybe some people here don't know, but I have been working on that space for 10 years. So before doing this thing on the web, you know, the regular web application, I actually have an entire 3D virtual world that we have been having conferences in there for the past 7 years. It's a niche community. It's not one of these, you know, major research communities. It's a very niche community, but they're very dedicated people. It's about 500 people every year that come to that conference. And you know, I have some interesting experiences about how conferences work and how 3D helps or doesn't help the social interaction. But that's a topic for another talk entirely.
Okay, as we're talking about some of the technology, I have brought in Jonathan, which means that our fish have to rotate. And so the first person to go is Puyan, according to the lots we drew. So thanks, Puyan, and goodbye. You're going to the attendees, as you know. Okay, yep, so I just thought if we're going to include some kind of discussion about technical things, having Jonathan here is a kind of like a good idea too. Did you have anything to add to that?
Nothing to add other than we're all trying our best. I think that it seems increasingly likely that we're going to have to continue to put up with virtual conferences. Like, if nothing else, hopefully we all agree ASE and FSC are virtual this year. You'll see later. So there are a lot of us who study like how people work with computers and how software developers work with computers. And I think that if, you know, enough of us put our heads together, we can hopefully at least partially solve this problem. It's never going to be the same as an in-person conference, but it can be better than just watching YouTube streams.
Okay, Bashar, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to make yet another pitch for maybe including some sort of social sciences input into this, because I mean there's some really interesting things that are happening. So when I went into the virtual space, I heard Andreas before I saw him, which is not how it would be in a real world. You know, I heard his voice and I had no idea where it was coming from, and I was desperately trying to use the 6 keys on my keyboard to find to understand where that was coming from. And generally, there's many ways in which we're getting stimulated in these environments, and I think we need to try and understand that a bit more and experiment with it. I think it's a huge opportunity, but I think we might be able to do better than trial and error if we think about it a bit more systematically.
One last thing, if it were not obvious, that everything that we built is open source. We're looking for anyone who wants to use it, and anyone who wants to improve it, talk to us, etc. So, you know, hopefully we'll get there.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on. Please feel free to put questions into the Q&A for us to ask. But I noticed I'm going to break my rules and bring an extra person in right now. I'm allowed to break the rules, I think. So I'm going to invite Sebastian Proksch in, and Sebastian, maybe you can come in and tell us, if I can find you. Oh, hang on 1 second. Just take a second to get you in here. Maybe you can come in and kind of share with us some of the things that you've been putting in chat about the combination, the hybrid conferences, and some of the observations you made. And then we'll ask our panelists about that.
Sorry, you were slightly cut off because when you switch to panelists, I mean, you get kicked out.
Yeah, you kind of get lost for it. Yeah, don't
I
be
missed your
alarmed
question, but I guess it is
disappear.
about reporting. Yeah. So yeah, hi everybody. I'm Sebastian Proksch. I'm assistant professor at Delft University of Technology, and yeah, I was also involved in the virtualization team. So I did a lot of the streaming in the background. Yeah, for me, I mean, like a big upfront, I'm a big proponent of virtual conferences. So obviously, I mean, I was involved in the streaming, so I'm a big fan of that. For me, that's especially important because if it would have not been a physical, if it would have not been virtual, but a physical conference, I could not have attended it. I got a child some months ago. I just bought a house middle in the renovation. So going virtual was for me the only way to actually attend ICSE this year. So that was awesome. But over the last days, I talked to several people, and I actually heard not only positive, but also some negative comments. So, like many people say that it's a great experience. You can wear, you can watch your videos without wearing pants. You can watch the videos asynchronously, like afterwards to catch up. It's also good for the environment because you save CO2, etc., etc. But then there were others that also were a bit more negative. Because they found it hard to actually following the talks. Like I think somebody mentioned that it was hard to get into ICSE mode because, I mean, if you're at a conference, I mean, you're just all day watching presentations, and I mean, it's clear that like what you do all day. But if you're at home, I mean, then there are the kids, and then there are other things that you need to pay attention to. Then also like stretching the talks over the whole day and over different time bands makes it quite challenging to follow everything. And like a lot of people also like miss personal contacts. I mean, that's also what we have heard so far.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can relate to both perspectives, but like in the panel, I would like to make like one point. We talked about values when we design future conferences. And for me, I think the one chance that we have is to talk about accessibility for the conferences. I mean, I think it's quite impressive that we have set up like such an enormous system like Louder, like especially given that how quickly it has been developed. But I mean, it seems to me a bit that we're raising the same paywall right now that we're successfully fighting for the papers. So, I mean, for me, I'm wondering whether we should try to like come to a point where we actually make talks more open, more easily accessible, make it like also like approachable for people that would typically not attend the conference. I guess everybody that would come to the physical conferences, like basically definitely gets added value out of that. So I mean, there is a natural interest for everybody to come to the conference for networking, but why not just make the rest accessible to everybody? Why not just make the talks open? Why not like record everything and make it available for free, basically?
Okay, good ideas. And I think actually that everything is going to be completely open on YouTube. So I think that is something new that's happened because of the way the conference was run this time. Is correct, Greg, Krista?
Not everything.
Okay.
but that was because
almost everything though, right?
Almost everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason why some things are not
Yeah.
there, it's because perhaps we didn't really think about it, and they ended up just being closed, events. And if we had thought about it, they probably
So I mean,
would have.
Well, there's
how to run all that, how to make technical infrastructure working, how to like record everything. For me, it just seems that it's like a good idea to think like to cater for the requirements of the general public rather than for the requirements of the publisher.
Okay, so just to kind of build on that a little bit, one of the discussions we've had over the past, actually previously when we were planning what we've been calling the third hour, which are those extra things that everyone's been liking quite a lot, is do we even, so we definitely want papers to be public, but we weren't sure that we wanted those. They were meant to be the kind of the equivalent of getting together with people, talking, building relationships, and we didn't. So some of those kind of Ask Me Anything sessions, we didn't necessarily want them to go public because we felt that that was kind of more of a discussion between people. So that's something to think about, because I see a lot of value in sharing that, but we didn't want people to go in those rooms and then get the feeling that things they might say and questions they might ask would then be public forever. So I think there's a balance, between that. Okay, so I'm going to pose, if anybody has questions, please post them, because it's kind of hard to keep up with all the chat, but questions are kind of easier to see. But I want to kind of build on this idea of kind of accessibility and kind of talk a little bit about kind of inclusion, and from one sense, making our conferences more virtual, or virtual really kind of makes them more inclusive and more accessible to everybody. But in another sense, a lot of the relationships that we've built kind of internationally with people from different countries are because we always because we see each other. And I think a lot of coffee break conversations lead to research, shared research ideas and projects and things like that. And I worry a little bit that the more virtual our conferences become, the more regionalized we might get. Like I might go to the conferences that are nearer the home and go to virtually to the ones that are far away. So how can we kind of balance these two ideas of maintaining our international community and also kind of being making things really accessible and open to people? Does anybody want to address that at all?
I would like just to say something, that it's 10 times harder to organize a hybrid event than to organize either a purely physical event or a purely virtual event. I mean, hybrid events are a whole other shebang, a whole other thing of their own. There's just completely different. I think the word hybrid is actually very misleading. There's nothing hybrid about the hybrid events. There's two things going on with two completely disconnected communities, and trying to connect them is extremely difficult. I don't even know if that is possible, because I mean, imagine if there's 40 of us in a room and 400 people that are not in the room, and it's completely different dynamics. So I am a little bit skeptical of what people are calling hybrid events, but there's definitely the room for physical events, and virtual events, and some sort of a mixture of them over time and for different purposes. And that's what I think.
Okay, so we have, I think Bashar and then Jon, you had your hands up.
Yeah, I mean, again, to echo what Krista said, but also to follow up from what I was saying in the beginning, which is it doesn't have to be a big event as it used to be in ICSE, you know, where everybody goes at the same time anymore, because if we are really going to exploit virtualization and connectivity online, then we don't all have to meet in this one space of time. I know it's sometimes convenient, but actually not. Some people miss conferences because they're not at the right time for whatever reason. So I'm just thinking, if we are to build a new type of conference, whether it's virtual or hybrid, we don't have to pack it with all the features every time. It may be that there are certain conferences that serve particular purposes, and that the hybrid can be on a smaller scale, but explore one particular aspect of interaction and community that we care about. And in another, we might sort of push other things like the physical presence. And so again, I think we need to just think carefully by not just saying these are the technologies, this is what we can offer. Can we create an environment where all of these features are available? I really sometimes was a bit overwhelmed by all the possibilities in front of me, which is what I used to suffer at ICSE in real life as well. But we don't have to do that, you know. It's okay to have a relaxed ICSE as well as a busy one. So yeah.
Okay, Jon.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think we need to consider this problem not just through the lens of ICSE, but through the lens of the other conferences as well. I mean, I've felt for a long time that we have too many software engineering conferences, and I think this now puts that into stark focus. So, you know, in the new normal, do we really need ICSE plus FSE plus ASE? You could imagine a different form of hybrids. So instead of having physical and virtual in one conference, you have a number of virtual conferences throughout the year, and then one physical conference, or maybe two physical conferences a year, so that people get that opportunity to come together, you know, be face to face with each other, but then they can also keep connected in between through more virtual means. So I think it's a broader conversation than just ICSE.
Okay, somebody suggested that we bring in a new first timer to ICSE. If anybody is brave enough, there's a first timer. Can you raise your? Oh, somebody has raised their hand. Let's see. Who has it? Okay, someone who's already been in the panel. So Puyang, you're going to have to wait. If there's anybody who's here for the first time that would like to speak up, I did notice. For example, Zhang Zhe said he's a student. I found it a bit hard to know new people in normal sessions. Well, I did meet several professors in the third hour live demo. So I think that kind of strengthens that idea. Okay.
Why don't you bring Carolyn? Carolyn, she's, you know what, I lost the list of attendees.
I don't see her.
I see if someone's raising their hand. That might be Claire Ingram.
No, that's, yeah. Okay, so anyway, if anybody else has any comments or questions, it's a bit hard to find all the comments in real time.
So there is one person with a hand raised, Claire Ingram.
Puyang. Okay, we have a new person.
And
so
Ari.
Who is it?
Yeah, Claire is a new person.
Okay, perfect. Claire, you're coming in. We want to hear from you. And Sebastian has volunteered to leave because he has to go somewhere. So Sebastian, thank you. And thanks for joining us, and goodbye. And let's bring in Claire. Okay, Claire should be coming. Hi, Claire. Okay, thanks for coming.
The buttons. Hi.
Yeah, what do you want to say?
Well, it's the first time I've been involved in ICSE, really. I have been involved in a few other events elsewhere before, and it's the first time for me in a fully virtual event. I found it surprisingly rich event, actually. There's so much going on, it really kind of took me aback a little bit, because I think mentally I'd prepared a little bit for lots of video watching on YouTube, and it really overwhelmed me quite how rich the whole experience was. In fact, it took a while. I don't know if this is a first timer only, if other people found it easier. It did take a little while to get to grips, a day or two, with everything that's going on and how to access it and make best use of the tools that were available. So perhaps that's something that gets better with practice and knowing the community better, and perhaps as we get used to more virtual events. But I do feel that there were some things which worked really well. I do like the mixture of having videos beforehand that perhaps I can watch before or even after a talk taking place that I couldn't make, and the live talks as well, and perhaps having the Slack rooms where there's discussion about a session going on in a room, live at the same time as the session was happening. I found that really quite nice, and perhaps that's something that could be blended with to bring in people who are attending virtually with people who are attending physically in a room, because anyone could participate in a Slack channel live during a talk maybe. I think I've particularly appreciated though how much effort's gone into all the third hour events, and how accessible they've been and how easy it has been to try and join into Zoom calls and start to meet a few new people. I think it's my overall kind of experience so far. I'm assuming that might be similar to many other people who are more familiar with the community and perhaps not quite so different.
Okay, great. Peggy, I'm wondering if I can bring you in. She was on chat a few minutes ago. Peggy was one of the team members that put together the third hour thing, so I thought it might be nice to hear from them. Okay, so I don't think she's there, but
I think
Gail Murphy.
Ari had a hand up.
Okay, okay, we're going to be bringing in that whole team in just a second, but yeah, let's bring in Ari now then. And that means somebody has to go. So I'm going to, okay, Ari, you're coming in, so be prepared. I don't want someone to be super surprised. Okay, I'm going to, Jonathan Bell, thanks for coming in and sharing your thoughts. I'm going to rotate you out. So putting you back into the audience, and thank you in a minute. Okay, Ari, go ahead, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Here's Amsterdam, nice and sunny weather. Listening to everything, and I was a bit triggered by what Jon was saying. You can also be a bit bolder and more ambitious, maybe. So maybe if we want to combine virtual and real life experiences, why cannot we think of the virtual thing as something continuous, so throughout the whole year? And it then combines ASE, ICSE, ICSE, ICSME, ISTA, whatever, TSE. And there, online, you announce talks, you announce new papers, and as soon as the paper comes in, you have discussions straight away. And it's maybe a bit like Stack Overflow. Everyone is on there. And then there's this actual physical event where you finally get to meet all those people who ask you questions all the time. This is maybe also a way to think about the future. That's all.
Okay, anyone have any response to that? Those are some really interesting ideas. Bashar.
So I like the idea. I just wanted to sort of, not to put a spanner in the works of all of this, but I think we should also think of one of the laws of robotics, which is to do no harm. And I think one of the things we need to be a little bit careful is that all this capability that we're providing, that we just think a little bit about the consequences that it's going to have on people's lives. At the moment, I'm jet lagged, even though I'm sitting on my desk here in my bedroom, and I'm just trying to listen. I want to listen to the live talks, and I have no discipline and no self-control, and so I keep staying up late at night trying to listen to it, falling asleep. and then waking up in the morning quickly to get to the next session. And I don't know why I'm doing that. It's maybe my addictive personality, but I think we have to be just a little bit careful about just understanding the consequences of what we do, in the same way as we might consider about any other ethical issues that we might care about. And so just as part of the mix, that we should also just maybe explore negative consequences of what we're doing.
Okay, John?
It's just a quick one. I'm sure you'll have this data when this is all over and you'll analyze this, but it'd be really interesting to see data on the different attendance patterns by different people, because I didn't. My experience of ICSE is probably the diametrically opposite of Bashar's. I really just kind of dipped in and dipped out as and when I liked, which has its drawbacks as well. But it'd be really interesting to see, you know, of your registered participants, what those common patterns of attendance were.
So I don't know if that's, do we have that data, Krista? Are we allowed to mine that data?
We don't, we actually, simply because John and I did not have time to instrument the whole thing. So basically, we don't know. We hope that we'll find out now in the survey. There will be a survey coming shortly to Slack. And I hope people tell us, because we are not collecting any data.
But we can definitely make sure we have those some questions in it. It will be what people think they did, which may be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Okay, we only have about 9 minutes left, but I want to read a question from Gail. We don't have time to bring more people in and out really, but she says, one idea to try to bridge some of the virtual and in-person divide could be to gather folks in regional areas to participate in the virtual conference together. This kind of goes to what I was trying to say before. We can do this, but what are the trade-offs of doing it? It would have the problems that the panel referred to in not meeting in person those from elsewhere, but one could imagine potentially traveling to some closer regional event with some participation together in the virtual event. Thoughts from the panel? I'm going to ask, Brittany, I was just going to call on you, so perfect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I keep thinking about the first time experience, especially the point that Carolyn made. I don't know how many people read her point in the chat, but I think the idea of what is being suggested helps a lot for the first time attendees, because one of the points that she made was, as a first time attendee, especially if you're an early PhD student, or even worse, an undergrad who's in this new environment, usually you look to have your mentor, your advisor, the people that are traveling with you to the conference from your university, to kind of be that that support for you as you're trying to network and meet people that are already in the community and things like that. And I think that type of setup could be particularly beneficial for first-time attendees. So that was kind of the point I wanted to make to what that was. I think that could be a potential advantage to that type of
Okay, setup. Thanks, Brittany. And I actually want to see what Dongmei has to say about that. And then we'll, Okay.
And then very quickly, I think the idea of organizing like local get-together events to enjoy the conference, or to get to know each other, I think that's a great idea. So from other conferences, for example, in computer vision or in some natural language processing conferences, I know that at least in China, like our lab, Microsoft Research Asia, or some universities, they just even before the conference, they would organize some presentation sessions for the student presenters to practice their presentations. So that actually, for example, gives us opportunities to get to know the students. It will be also a great recruiting event. So I think that's I like that idea.
Okay, great. And so what we want to do in the last few minutes is bring in the 2021 people. I brought Puyan back because in the end, he's the only original fish that got rotated off. So I kind of sucked at doing my job of sending people in and out. So I brought him back. But I want to invite in, if I can find Tao and Natalia. So I just surprised Puyan by bringing him in. I noticed his face looked very surprised to have arrived on the screen. So I'm warning people now. Tao, you're invited in, and Natalia, you're invited in. And so we only have about 6 more minutes. Krista, while they're coming in, do you want? Yes.
So brief comment in chat. A lot of questions are emerging about the conference is coming up, FSC, ASC, and so on. It's great that we discuss ICSE 2021, but maybe after this we should have some other discussion about things coming up sooner.
Okay, if we have time. But anybody who wants to can address any of those things that Darko has raised there. Tao didn't arrive.
Tao arrived.
Oh, Tao arrived, but
yes. Natalia's not here.
Natalia's not here.
Let me try again.
Oh, no.
Octavia's here, which is nice to have him, but I'm not sure if that's what you meant.
I told you this wasn't going to be perfect. Okay, so we got a few minutes left. I promised Krista we'd give her some words to say at the end. But maybe Ari, Tao, and Natalia, you've heard what people have been saying. Really, it's only time to come up with some little ideas and get a bit of a sense of what people are thinking. Do you have any comments or any of the questions that you've heard or anything you'd like to share? And for those of you who don't know, this is Looking Forward to ICSE 2021. Natalia is the general chair. Ari and Tao are the program co-chairs.
Well, all I can say, I think, is that I will aim for a physical part of ICSE at 2021, if we can, I mean, if COVID allows us. But I have enjoyed a lot several aspects of the virtual conference, so I think we should keep that part of allowing virtual participants. I was hearing Krista saying that hybrid approach is not really easy. I think that's the one we will try in 2021. In the worst case, I mean, if we are all confined and nobody can travel, of course, we will go for a full virtual. But in the worst case, I mean, we expect 2,000 people, I mean, at least the Europeans that can come to Spain, and then the rest of the world attend virtual. But I mean, I have missed a lot the close contact of meeting colleagues and shaking hands and all that. And at this point, I don't see that the technology is replacing that feeling. So let's see if COVID allows us to have to physically meet in Madrid. We have worked so hard to have a nice social program, etc. That it's, for us, it's terrible if at the end it goes virtual. But I mean, it happens already to the Korean team, so I know we will be able to survive.
Yeah, I think this question of the virtual ICSE is really challenging. Krista said that's the worst of the, and I think that's true. It's easier to make something fully virtual or fully in person. So, you may be the ones that have to tackle that challenge of how to, I don't want to use the word hybrid anymore.
Okay.
Blended.
No, but I mean,
I don't know if it's going to exist. We're going to have a word for it, and I don't know what that is.
Let's call it differently, but at least relax I mean, because traditionally in ICSE you have to attend physically, for instance, to present a paper. We will relax a lot all those aspects. I mean, and allow people, if they don't want or they cannot travel, to make presentations in the room, I mean, physically, but remotely. I mean, so I think there's a lot of things we can relax from the fully physical to something, as Sebastian was saying. So people that cannot attend that year or something like that, having cheap registration fees virtually, so people can approach ICSE by not traveling. So okay, let's not call it hybrid, but at least I mean, having a different approach that is not 100% physical, and that will happen even if COVID finishes and we all want to travel. We will keep a virtual part, because I think it has been very interesting to several things.
Okay, great, thank you. Krista, do you have any, so I'm gonna give Krista a few minutes. I know we're at time. Krista, if you have a few things to say, and then I'm gonna let everybody finish with 1 or 2 sentences, that's it. as a kind of closing thought.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
Krista, you get to go first.
Very quickly. I think that people are getting a little bit too optimistic about when people are able to travel again. I'm a little less optimistic. I think, especially for the Americans, I don't think we're going to see Americans in conferences anytime soon. So I think we better prepare for that. And I know it's great to continue to think, oh yeah, you know, physical conferences, we really miss the handshakes and going out for dinner and stuff like that. And of course, you know, it's not the same experience at all. It's a different experience. And as I hope you could see, there's a whole slate of possibilities that you know, that you can, it's basically a design space that we can experiment with for the virtualization of these events. And it's not the same as the physical events. And so it's just a matter of figuring out exactly where in that design space we want to be, and it's what, you know, lots of things are possible. But I think number one, that there are conferences coming up right now through the fall, and I'm afraid through 2021, where there's going to be completely, you know, a significant part of the community who will not be able to travel. That's number one. You better start planning for that right now, because as you can see, this was crazy. We put this together in 2 months. I was very motivated to make a good experience for everyone, but you know, it requires, you know, it's not, you know, I'm a crazy person. Sometimes I jump in, but it should be, you know, there should be preparation over a longer period of time and planning over a longer period of time.
I mean, we will do that, Krista. I mean, in the sense we are in a different position that Korea was. So I imagine that before January, let's say, let's wait what happens in autumn. And if we are as we are now, let's say that I agree with you, mostly we will, then we will go for either virtual, or if we can travel in Europe as we are able now, we'll have a physical part for those.
Okay, I'm going to have to draw this to a close. I'm going to let everybody say one sentence. It's gone from 2 to 1 now. So if anyone has a last thought, let's go for it. Bashar?
Citizenship, community, values. 3
Okay.
words.
Jon?
This, you know, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. This is an opportunity to really rethink how we do things.
Dong-Mei?
I'm going to say a very practical one. I would look forward to getting the platform instrumented so that we will get first-hand data to really understand our experiences. Thank you.
Okay, Brittany?
I'm going to take that a step further and say, we're researchers. Let's get some data. They got surveys going out. Let's use that data. Let's work together and make it as awesome as we can. I put it in the chat too. So, you know, reach out to me. I'm super friendly. I love stuff like this. Let's make it happen. Great.
Gregg?
The opportunity for inclusivity, when you can reach out to parts of the world that just can't come to an ICSE, a particular one, or ICSE at all, is just one we can't let go. Yep.
Ari?
One, I miss seeing all of you in person, so I hope to see you soon in real life. I really miss you. Number 2, for ICSE 2021, as program chairs, we are committed to keeping all the successes of this year, next year, and hopefully able to combine it with physical presence.
That's great. Claire?
I want to echo some of the comments which are currently in the chat about inclusivity and being able to reach more people than before. I think that also extends probably to a lot of practitioners, particularly smaller practitioners, SMEs and startups, who really perhaps could engage with a lot of the content and talks that we produce, but don't usually have the time or budget to travel to a large conference from distance away. So in the future, this is a great way to bring together practitioners and researchers better.
Okay, great idea. Natalia?
Yes, enhance the physical experience with everything that we have learned about virtual.
Okay, Tao?
I think like for what we learned from the virtual conferences, we can also think about some of the practices could be also beneficial for physical conferences. I mean, don't forget about that part. Yeah.
Okay,
thank you.
Puyan?
Yeah, inclusivity and first-time citizen. Main reason is that many people cannot get visa, have travel restrictions, and having a hybrid model help them to participate. Thanks.
Great. And Darko?
Nothing to add. I was background person helping you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's all we have time for. I think it's really clear that you know, there's some issues, there's some things we have to tackle. There's also really, really great opportunities for us to rethink what we want to be, where we want to go, how we want to do it. And I hope this is just the beginning of the discussion. So thank you. Thank you everybody for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your conference. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
See you in the lobby.